Leaving work early, I couldn't shake off a nagging feeling of dread. As I, Laura Bennett, a 28-year-old part-time marketing assistant, approached my home, the unease grew. My mind was racing, but I brushed off the anxiety as a side effect of not feeling well. Little did I know that my world was about to be turned upside down. Stepping into the silent house, I felt the atmosphere shift. The home I shared with my husband Daniel felt unfamiliar, almost hostile. Driven by an inexplicable instinct, I found myself tiptoeing towards the back room where muffled voices broke the eerie silence. My heart pounded against my chest, a sense of impending doom taking hold. I hesitated at the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the knob. The voices became clearer, a man and a woman, intimately engaged in conversation. Pushing the door open just a crack, I peered inside. The sight that greeted me was like a punch to the gut. Daniel, my husband of 3 years, was entwined with a younger woman. Their laughter and affectionate whispers were a stark contrast to the coldness and distance that had crept into our marriage. I stood there, frozen, as Daniel's words sliced through the last threads of trust I had clung to. "Marrying Laura was a mistake," he said, his voice laced with contempt. "Young and beautiful is what I deserve. Isabel, you make me feel alive." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I fought them back. This was not the time for weakness. I needed to be strong, to think clearly. Quietly, I closed the door and retreated, my mind racing with the betrayal I had just witnessed. It wasn't just the affair that hurt. It was the realization that the man I loved saw me as nothing more than a mistake. As I made my way to the living room, a plan began to take shape in my mind. I needed evidence, something concrete to expose them for what they were. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. No, who was I kidding? It was about both. I knew I had to be careful, to play my cards right. Daniel was a lawyer, cunning and persuasive. I couldn't confront him without solid proof, so I decided to gather evidence of his infidelity. It was time for me to step out of the shadows and take control of my life. In the days that followed, I became a silent observer in my own home, collecting pieces of their betrayal. Text messages, late-night calls, the subtle changes in Daniel's behavior, everything was a clue, a piece of the puzzle I was putting together. I was no longer the trusting, naive wife. I was a woman on a mission, a woman wronged, ready to strike back. As I lay in bed each night, planning my next move, I realized this was more than just about exposing Daniel and Isabel. This was about reclaiming my life, my dignity. I was ready to face the storm. I had to be. When Daniel and I first met, it felt like a scene out of a romantic movie. He was a charismatic lawyer, and I, a marketing assistant, found myself drawn to his confidence and charm. Our courtship was a whirlwind, filled with laughter, deep conversations, and promises of a future together. We married within a year, a decision that seemed right at the time, but now felt like a hasty mistake. Our married life began like a dream. Daniel was attentive, caring, and seemed genuinely interested in my life, but as the months passed, the facade began to crumble. He became more absorbed in his work, often returning late, and our conversations dwindled to mundane exchanges. One evening, as we sat in silence over dinner, I attempted to bridge the growing gap between us. "Daniel, we barely talk anymore. Is everything okay at work?" I asked, reaching for his hand. He withdrew his hand and replied coldly, "Work is fine, Laura. I'm just tired. You wouldn't understand the pressure I'm under." His words stung, creating a rift that only grew with time. As Daniel's detachment increased, so did my workload at home and the office. I tried to compensate for his absence by keeping the house perfect and excelling at my job, hoping it would bring back the man I fell in love with. Then came the day that marked the beginning of the end. Daniel, in a rare moment of candor, shared his thoughts on our marriage. "Laura, you know I love you, but I feel like you're not pulling your weight financially. I'm carrying the burden of our expenses, and it's not fair." His words felt like a slap. I had been contributing as much as I could from my part-time job, cutting back on personal expenses to support our household. "But Daniel, I've been trying my best. I'm already stretched thin between work and home," I protested. Daniel scoffed, "Your best isn't good enough. Maybe if you worked harder or got a better job, we wouldn't be in this situation." His dismissive attitude left me reeling. I thought of the late nights, the unending household chores, and the sacrifices I had made for our marriage. It was clear that my efforts and my love were not enough for him. That night, I lay awake, contemplating our relationship. The man I married, the man I thought would be my partner in life, had become a stranger. His words echoed in my head, a constant reminder of the growing void between us. The seeds of doubt and resentment took root, setting the stage for the inevitable confrontation that would change everything. The days following that conversation felt like walking through a minefield. Daniel's indifference towards me grew, and with it my sense of isolation. I started to dread his return home each evening, not knowing which version of him I'd face, the cold, distant husband, or the one who saw me as a financial burden. One particularly tense evening, Daniel arrived home earlier than usual. I greeted him with a cautious optimism, hoping for a semblance of the warmth we once shared. "You're home early, is everything okay?" I asked. Daniel's response was curt, his eyes void of any warmth. "I left early to talk about something important. We need to discuss our finances again." His tone was not inviting a conversation, but demanding a resolution. I felt a knot form in my stomach. "What about our finances?" I inquired, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's about the mortgage, Laura. I'm not okay with shouldering most of the burden. You need to contribute more." His words were like daggers, undermining my efforts and sacrifices. I couldn't contain my frustration. "I'm already giving nearly all of my income towards the mortgage, Daniel. How much more do you expect me to contribute?" My voice was a mix of anger and desperation. Daniel leaned back, his expression one of annoyance. "That's not enough. You should consider increasing your work hours or finding a higher-paying job. Being cooped up at home isn't good for anyone." His suggestion hit me like a wave of ice-cold water. "Increase my work hours? I'm already struggling to balance my job with the housework you leave entirely to me." Daniel stood up, his demeanor turning hostile. "That's your job, Laura. I'm out working all day, earning for us. It's only fair you take care of the house, and frankly, you're not even doing a great job at that." I was stunned into silence. His words were not just hurtful. They were a complete dismissal of everything I had been doing for us, for our home. It was clear that in his eyes, I was failing at being a wife, a partner. As he walked away, leaving me standing there, a mix of hurt and anger bubbling inside me, I knew something had to change. I couldn't continue living like this, constantly demeaned and undervalued. The man I married was gone, replaced by this cold, unfeeling stranger. That night, as I lay in bed, the weight of his words crushing me, I realized that my marriage was not just strained, it was broken, and I was the only one trying to fix it. It was time to stop. It was time to start thinking about myself, about my worth. And most importantly, it was time to start planning my escape from this toxic relationship. The days blurred together in a haze of resentment and disbelief. Daniel's demands and coldness continued, each word chipping away at the last remnants of our marriage. Then, one fateful day, I stumbled upon a truth that would change everything. I arrived home from work, expecting the usual empty house, only to find Daniel's car in the driveway. Confused, I entered quietly, only to hear laughter from the living room, a sound so rare in our home nowadays. Peering around the corner, my heart stopped. There was Daniel, cozy and relaxed, with Isabel, the same woman I had seen him with that day. Suppressing the urge to confront them, I retreated to the kitchen, my mind racing. This was no casual visit. The intimacy between them was palpable, undeniable. And then it hit me. Isabel wasn't just a fling, she was a full-blown affair. Later that evening, after Isabel had left, I faced Daniel. "Who is Isabel, really?" "She seems more than just a friend," I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Daniel's reaction was swift and dismissive. "She's just a colleague. Don't make a big deal out of it, Laura." But I knew better. The way he avoided my gaze, the tension in his voice, it was all too clear. Daniel was lying, and I was done being the fool. That night, I lay in bed, my mind made up. I needed proof of his betrayal, something concrete to expose him and free myself from this sham of a marriage. My plan was simple, yet risky. I would record their encounters, gather evidence of the affair. Over the next few weeks, I became a shadow in my own home, watching, waiting. The opportunity came sooner than expected. One afternoon, I returned home to find them together again. This time, I was prepared. With my phone discreetly positioned, I recorded their intimate conversation, their plans, their betrayal. As I listened to the recording later, a mix of sorrow and rage washed over me. but there was also a sense of empowerment. I had the evidence I needed. It was time to act, to end this farce and reclaim my dignity. With each step of my plan, a sense of clarity and determination grew within me. This was not just about revenge, it was about justice. For too long I had been a spectator in my own life, but no more. I was ready to face Daniel and Isabel, to expose their deceit. It was time for them to face the consequences of their actions. Armed with the evidence of Daniel's infidelity, I felt a newfound strength. It was no longer about salvaging a broken marriage, it was about exposing the truth and getting justice. But first, I needed an ally, someone who would be as impacted by this revelation as I was. My opportunity came unexpectedly. While going through Daniel's phone one evening, I discovered that Isabel was not only married, but her husband, James, was a prominent client of Daniel's firm. This was more than just personal. It was a professional bombshell that would have far-reaching consequences. I contacted James, introducing myself as Daniel's wife, and requesting a meeting under the guise of discussing an urgent matter about our spouses. We met at a quiet cafe, away from prying eyes. The look on James's face when I revealed the affair was a mixture of shock, anger, and betrayal. James's reaction was visceral. "Isabel and your husband? This is unbelievable. How long has this been going on?" he demanded, his voice shaking with emotion. I shared the evidence, watching as his face contorted with pain and fury. I had my suspicions, but this is concrete proof. She's betrayed me, and with your husband, no less. The plan was set into motion. James would confront Isabel and I would confront Daniel, both of us armed with the undeniable truth. It was a risky move, but I was past caring. I wanted to see Daniel's facade crumble, to watch him face the consequences of his actions. The confrontation with Daniel was cathartic. I watched as his face turned pale, his usual confident demeanor crumbling under the weight of his exposed secrets. "Laura, this isn't what it looks like. We can talk about this," he stammered, his voice betraying his panic. "No, Daniel, there's nothing left to talk about. I know everything." "And so does James," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. The fallout was swift and devastating. James filed for divorce and cut all personal and professional ties with Daniel. Isabel's world came crashing down, and Daniel's career took a massive hit. But for me, it was a bittersweet victory. I had exposed them, but at the cost of my own marriage and the life I thought I had. As I watched Daniel's life unravel, I felt a sense of closure. It was a harsh lesson, but one that freed me from the chains of a loveless marriage. I was ready to move on, to rebuild my life on my terms. In the aftermath of the confrontation, the reality of my situation began to sink in. I watched as Daniel's meticulously constructed world fell apart. The man who once held himself with unshakable confidence was now a shadow of his former self, reeling from the impact of his own actions. The final blow came during a tense meeting at our lawyer's office to discuss the divorce proceedings. Daniel, looking defeated, tried to salvage what little he could from the ruins of his life. "Look, Laura, can't we sort this out amicably? Think about what you're doing here. This will ruin both our lives," Daniel pleaded, his voice laced with desperation. I looked at him, feeling a mixture of pity and revulsion. "Amicable? After what you did? You didn't think of our lives when you were with Isabel. It's too late for regrets, Daniel." Our lawyer, a stoic man, handed Daniel the divorce papers. "The terms are clear. Given the circumstances, there will be no alimony. You'll also need to agree on the division of assets." Daniel's face contorted in anger. "This is ridiculous. I earned most of this. She doesn't deserve half of my assets." I remained calm, my resolve unshaken. "I don't want your money, Daniel. I want my freedom. And you can keep your assets. I'm starting anew, far from the shadow of your deceit." The divorce was finalized swiftly. Daniel's career continued to spiral downward as the scandal became public knowledge. Isabel, on the other hand, faced her own set of consequences. Her marriage to James ended in a bitter divorce, and she was left to grapple with the social and professional fallout of her actions. As for me, I emerged from the chaos with a sense of liberation. I had lost my marriage, but I gained something far more valuable, my self-respect and independence. I sold the house, a place that once symbolized our shared dreams, and moved into a modest apartment, embracing my new beginning. My days were no longer filled with the dread of Daniel's return or the anguish of his betrayal. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life, rediscovering my passions, and reconnecting with old friends. The experience had changed me, but it also strengthened me. I realized that life often throws unexpected challenges our way, and how we respond to them defines us. I chose to stand up for myself, to fight back against betrayal and deceit, and in doing so, I found a resilience I never knew I had.